So, John, I appreciate the opportunity to come in. I'm excited about Alaska, our future, and our future opportunity. I'm excited that we do such an amazing job of responsibly, safely, and efficiently extracting our natural resources. I'm excited that I have a voice now with Power of the Future in securing a future that can support our families, support our state, support our nation with necessary and valuable materials for generations to come. I'm confident most of you guys have heard these statistics before. So if you haven't, stop me. Well, don't, because I still want to get through them. Because they're part of the context of my talk, if you're repeated. As of 2017, the oil and gas industry in this state employs over 5,000 workers directly, with over 4,200 of those being residents of the state of Alaska. They earn almost $750 million in direct wages. If you include vendors and government entities that they do business with, there's over $6 billion in wages and 110,000 impacted jobs, nearly 35% of all the jobs in Alaska from the oil and gas directly and indirectly. Mining currently producing more than 9,000 direct and indirect jobs with over 700 million in wages. There are 6 major producing mines currently. There are 7 more somewhere in the exploration or permitting stage. In addition, there's more than 600 placer miners and mines operating throughout the state. Alaska's forest products are responsible for hundreds of direct jobs, about 450. And they say that they create 3 to 4 indirect jobs for every direct job. They're worth millions and tens of millions of dollars to the Alaskan economy. And we all know that fishing and tourism are major economic drivers as well. Now, before the POMV legislation passed, extraction and resource-based revenues were almost 85% on average over the last 10 years of general fund income, and they still sit above 50%. In short, energy and natural resource workers in this state are the heartbeat of the workforce, the soul of the Alaskan economy. They and the employers and the employees combine to create much of our state's primary economy. And if we factor in the trickle-down effect to service industries, whether it's restaurants or, I know Alaskans like their toys, right? Whether you go out and buy a new snow machine, whatever, you're supporting it because of jobs from that industry. And then I read about 3 or 4 philanthropic reports from various boards that I've sat on over the years. And somewhere between 60 to 70% of all individual philanthropic giving is attributable to people that have a primary or secondary role from energy workers here in the state. So we give, and we give our time and we give our money because people in the industry, quite honestly, make good money and they have some to give. But sadly, there's a coordinated, extremely well-financed movement to put traditional energy workers, the people in oil, gas, mining, timber, fishing, out of work across the U.S. And that's why Power of the Future is here. Remember, click the button.
I don't know what's up with our technology today. It worked earlier.
I can just hit it. Let's go. Okay.
Oh, you were turned off.
Oh, that. Turned off, turned on. I can hit the button. So in 2017, I want to give you kind of a background on Power of the Future. In 2017, longtime communications and messaging leader Daniel Turner, who lives in Washington, D.C., had had enough. Over the past few years, he'd seen Appalachia area coal miners, some of their families, 4th and 5th generation of mining, put out of work due to Obama-era environmental policies. He'd witnessed firsthand the damage inflicted on communities when environmental extremists won, right? And forced hundreds of people out of work. He'd heard stories of divorce, foreclosures, helplessness, people turning to drugs and alcohol, and basically having a feeling of hopelessness when those jobs were put on the back burner. Then he watched the synchronized protests, non-organic protests, of the Keystone Pipeline. Now, he was told it was organic from friends who were there, but anybody who's ever helped set up a man camp, how long does it take? There were active man camps within 24 hours of the first protesters showing up. That's not an organic, just show up movement. And when they won, Nobody stuck around to help retrain the workers who were going to be employed by the pipeline. They just picked up their tips, walked away, and left what? Trash, human waste, confusion, chaos, and concern for the future. Because you see, when Michael Bloomberg and Tom Steyer and the Sierra Club and the National Resources Defense Council and organizations like that win, they don't stick around. They go on to the next conquest. They go on to the next mine. They go on to the next oil rig. They go on to the next opportunity to impact their environmental mandate, and they could really care less about the workers that they leave behind. So Daniel did something about it. He got a small group of investors together, and he founded Power of the Future. February 2018, his first month of operation. On January 1st, 2019, I became his first employee as the state director. We now have two, me and a guy named Larry Behrens in New Mexico. I can tell you without question that this is going to be the most fun, rewarding, and impactful job I will have had in nearly 30 years in the workforce. Why? Because Power of the Future is a national nonprofit focused on advocating and protecting energy and natural resource development workers. Again, the heart and soul of Alaska. As well as protecting the current jobs and projects that they work in, and the advocating for future opportunities across the nation, especially here in Alaska, that could help create American energy dominance, American energy independence, and a stronger America within the realm of the world. Now, I'm going to give any of you guys who might be slightly or heavily tinged by the thought that Mother Earth should be protected at all costs credit for your passion. But there are hundreds of millions of dollars. We've counted at least $2.6 billion last year spent in the U.S. to wipe out almost 100,000 jobs. They're not coming back. My question to the people that want to continue to do damage to those jobs is why? Why don't you work on the technology and with industry to more safely, more effectively, more efficiently keep people at work, keep families whole, keep opportunities going, and let's work together to extract resources and drive energy production across the U.S. better. So as a policy organization, I'm going to say this. You won't see Power of the Future putting money behind candidates. Again, we're a policy organization. We're not a political one. I may like somebody, I may not like somebody, but I'm not going to go out there with my little Power of the Future hat on and say, vote for or against X. But what I am going to do is unrelentingly promote jobs and opportunities here in the state of Alaska. You guys know here on the peninsula how important the oil and gas industry is. If it went away, think about the devastation here on the peninsula. If Michael Bloomberg and his Beyond Coal initiative shut down the Usabelli coal mine up in Healy, granted it's not on the peninsula, it puts 65% of that community out of work. 65% of the people that work in the community of Healy work directly or indirectly for Usabelli. That would be devastating. But it's happening all over the country. It's happening all over the country. Morgantown, West Virginia, Louisiana, New Mexico, Nebraska, Montana. Those are just some of the places in the last 6 months that the environmental movement has been able to wipe out almost 10,000 jobs between those that I just mentioned. 10,000 families impacted. Countless trickle-down families impacted, right? You'll hear me tirelessly encourage Alaskans to reject the emotionally driven, short non-facts arguments that put Alaska development at risk. That risk harms Alaska's economic future, costs Alaskans jobs, threatens community fabric, and the way of life that we have here in the state. Now, before you start asking, why is he so concerned about that? I was born in Fairbanks, raised outside, and came back. I was joking with Bruce and others. My parents moved me back to Alaska my senior year of high school. Thanks, Mom and Dad. After being in Seattle from the time I was 3 and a half till the time I was 17, Mom and Dad decided that it was worth coming back up to Alaska, and I begrudgingly came along. And it was the best move my parents could have ever done. I will never leave. I have a family, a wife, married 27 years next week, of almost 5-year-old son. Yeah, we started late. He wears me out. 4 schnauzers, property in the Keys, and a background in nothing industry related. I have never worked for industry. I worked for GCI and ACS a total of almost 25 years. So I come from a telecom background. But again, understanding from a sales perspective there, what drives Alaska? It's industry, it's resource extraction. The economic opportunities, whether it's direct or indirect, come from the earth, come from the water, come from the land, right? So I've been fortunate to travel to almost 200 communities in the state. I've seen resource extraction opportunities in every region of the state. And I can tell you, we do it safer, more efficient, better than anywhere that I know of from talking to friends and colleagues across the nation. So I mentioned that I was going to tirelessly advocate for opportunities. The other thing that I get to do with my job is talk about why people would fight development and what we should do about it. And really, threats to energy workers come from 2 main groups. These waves of anti-job activities threaten our state's fabric come from environmental groups, and I'm going to say far left politicians or environmentally bent politicians. Now, the Sierra Club and National Resources Defense Council are 2 of the most Alaskan-focused national organizations, with teams of lawyers operating from East Coast offices, funded by multi-billionaires who live outside. They use Alaska as their private playground. The organizations aren't driven as the Sierra Club's original mission was by cleaning up trash in the Sierra Nevadas. Their goal is to turn opportunity into parks. They tie up every possible development project in frivolous lawsuits until they either win or until the companies that they're fighting just cry uncle and give up. They get their money from groups like the 1630 Fund based off the East Coast, Rockefeller Foundation out of New York, Bloomberg Foundation out of New York, New Venture Fund out of Washington, D.C. Groups with their eyes in Alaska for what I think and what Power of the Future thinks are all the wrong reasons. Many of those groups helped fund the Stand for Salmon initiative. We all know how that turned out. And even though it was soundly defeated, make no mistake, they're working on the next one. Whether it's oil tax reform or, locking up mining in the state or some other anti-development, anti-jobs, anti-opportunity measure, it's coming down the pipe. We know we've seen 5 such opportunities in the last 14 years. It's just a matter of time until the next one comes down. And when you combine those environmental groups with people like Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez on a national level, or some of Representative Knopp's colleagues in the legislature, who would rather see Alaska stop producing fossil fuels, stop producing anything that harms Mother Earth. What you see is a move afoot to devastate Alaska's job market, because we cannot create enough wind and solar power here to do things that visionaries like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Green New Deal want to see. We cannot create enough wind power to run South Central Alaska, let alone the state. Nuclear is off the table because nobody wants a nuclear plant in their village. I know there are opportunities out there, and the villages are right now, for the most part, saying, nope. Solar is a little bit challenging in the winter. And the last hydro project, the NRDC, the Alaska Center for the Environment, Cook Inlet Keeper, and others, opposed the Susitna-Watana Dam, which before the finds of the Cook Inlet gas was going to provide 50% of South Central's power needs. And that was busted because people didn't want to see potential harm to fish. Thank God for Cook Inlet gas, right? We were talking about rolling brownouts 15 years ago. Now, I can turn my heat up to 85 if I want. I just pay a bigger bill to get started. Even the mainstream media in Alaska has a bias, although it's certainly not. We put this in there because mainstream media is always tends to be in favor of environmental groups rather than industry. But really up here in Alaska, it's fairly even. You're gonna have an organization like NRDC have a quote, and you'll have somebody like Kara Mario or Rebecca Logan, or somebody from Marathon, or somebody from Quantico, kind of have a counter. But every once in a while, that whole feelings over facts, mainstream media bias comes into play. So Power of the Future is here to be a proactive voice in the discussion because, after all, and I'm going to say this a couple more times in this presentation, jobs and the employees who fill them are Alaska's greatest resource. They deserve to be protected, they deserve to be advocated for. And anything that we do here with Power of the Future, we believe is a worthwhile, worthy endeavor. Now, I'm just going to brag on my boss for a second, but I want you guys to understand the Power of the Future began again a year ago with Daniel as the only person in the organization. He's really good at framing discussions and in a different light. He has been on hundreds, I think we lost count at like 700 radio and TV programs in the last 15 months. The guy is a media hawk. As a matter of fact, I talked with him at 4:30 this morning Anchorage time because he literally had 5, 6, 7, I think he had 9 by the time the day is done, media hits the rest of the day. Why? Because we're in the process of filling out, or we wrote a report on Joe Biden's lurch to the left on his environmental policies. And people want to talk about it. He was on Tucker Carlson 2 nights ago to talk about it. He's really, really good at what he does. We've been mentioned in President Trump's West Wing reads. Try to say that fast 3 times. It's a tongue twister. And recently we produced several queries under the New Mexico equivalent of the Freedom of Information Act. Why? We did so because we wondered how a new gubernatorial administration could come in and within 13 months overhaul the entire environmental policy for the state. Everything changed. There were 9 sections in their statutes. All 9 had major rewrites in 13 months. And what we found out was that there were emails exchanged among environmental groups and a key member of the governor's staff, her energy secretary, going back as far as 6 months prior to this election, but having her forward them into her government account, where she basically said, hey, environmentalists, if you don't like what you're seeing here, change it. If you don't think you're going to make enough money on it, change it. We're willing to listen. And that's not in the best interest of the state of New Mexico. We had almost 200 media hits in the first 5 days after that story ran. And again, why? Because we're doing stuff that most advocacy organizations don't do. Getting a little more aggressive. My first set of FOIA requests went out last week. I'm going to FOIA some people that have anti-development as their unofficial middle name. And we're going to see what happens when we start to uncover the trails that could maybe lead to harming Alaska's business opportunities. Jonna?
For those that aren't aware, what is a FOIA?
It's a Freedom of Information Act request. It's basically a request for anything that, in this case, I can't FOIA legislators because they're citizen legislators, but I can do city government, borough government, administrative side, even courts, even judges and justices I can FOIA. What I've sent out is really more local and previous Walker administration information. I can't find too much fault with what Governor Dunleavy's doing on resource development and opening Alaska for business, but I certainly can go back to Governor Walker and some of the stuff that he did. So, why Alaska, guys? Why is Power of the Future here? And why was I the first? Why was I the first state director hired? Well, it really comes down to this. We're ground zero for ENGO, and ENGO is environmental non-government organizations like the Sierra Club, like the Audubon Society, like the World Wildlife Fund, like Coquilla Keeper, like Great Alaska or Northern Alaska Environmental Center. Right? We're ground zero between ANWR, Pebble, OCS development, Cook Inlet development, tidal zones, timber. We have a lot of opportunity. Environmentalists don't want it. So they fundraise. As a matter of fact, they fundraise off of Alaska's name and off of Alaska's opportunity and threaten Alaska opportunity in the future. Let me give you an example. When I was interviewing with Daniel, he asked me to find him a couple of NGO activities in Alaska and be prepared to talk about them. In a 15-second type hit search, I found 37 active campaigns, and I didn't spend a whole lot of time looking at them. I mean, they're right there. Save the polar bear, give to World Wildlife Fund. Stop Anwar development, give to NRDC. The Endangered Species Act needs to be updated. Alaskan, birds are at stake. Audubon's at stake. Trout Unlimited. Stand for Salmon might have lost, but we still need to protect the world from pellet. Right? I mean, it's crazy the way that environmental groups fundraise off of Alaska. So that's one of the things that Daniel and the board and the funders found an opportunity for, making an impact here. President Trump has mandated that American energy become dominant in the world and that the U.S., as much as possible, become independent of foreign needs. And American energy dominance, quite frankly, needs Alaska. There is more potential opportunity in this state than the other 49 states in rare earth minerals, rare earth materials, mineral, oil and gas, even some timber, right? 80%, as I mentioned, of the state percent or more of the state's economy, take out the permanent fund, is driven by resource and energy jobs. And quite honestly, again, there's a boundless opportunity for continued responsible development. So since I've taken this job, and again, I've been here since January 1st, I've spoken to over 200 individuals. That's a lot of cups of coffee. I've spoken with groups like this almost 50 times. I've met with 37 of the 60 legislators directly, both Republicans and Democrats. Daniel and I met with Governor Dunleavy, with Lieutenant Governor Meyer, and when I was back in DC visiting Daniel and doing some training, we met with our congressional delegation, all three of them. The message that we're giving to them is the same message I'm giving to you today. Number one, Alaska's energy and resource development workforce is a keystone to the state. Its importance cannot be overlooked. It has an everyday impact on our lives, whether we're directly employed in the industry or not. It's one that needs to be protected in the future. Speaking of the future, it's bright. Opportunities to safely and effectively extract oil and gas, minerals, timber, and rare earth materials really is boundless. There's tons and tons. We don't even know in the state of Alaska how much we really have as far as natural resources. There are areas of the state that may or may not hold abundance. People have been too busy working on the stuff that they know is out there. So if we're going to work towards American energy independence, energy dominance, American security, kind of all roads somehow lead through Alaska. And the environmental movement, with few exceptions, can really care less about the jobs and the people that they leave behind in their wake. The millions upon millions of dollars, the billions of dollars, could be spent doing something differently. Last slide. So what are our priorities? You can see them up there. We're going to continue to advocate. We're going to continue to support new opportunities to continue to responsibly develop Alaska. And we're going to ensure that the eco groups are held accountable for activities that are damaging to Alaska's future. And we're going to do it aggressively, more aggressively than most policy organizations. When I was looking at this job, I talked to AOGA, I talked to the Alliance, I talked to the State Chamber, I talked to the Forest Association. And I said, hey guys, what do you do really, really well? And where do you see a gap? What can we do to supplement and augment what you're already doing? And they said, hold the NGOs accountable. I was like, beautiful, we can do that. So whether it's op-eds or talks like this, We're going to do it because energy and natural resource development workers are worthy of the support. And the anti-job, anti-community, anti-development fanaticism is damaging to Alaska. So.